All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Ownership. It is Peyton here, and I'm here with Clay. Clay, how you doing?
I'm doing just fabulous. How about
That's
yourself,
what we like
Peyton?
to hear. I'm doing just fine, of course.
Good.
I'm excited for today's episode here. We have another fresh owner. I don't want to give away too much of it, so without further ado, here is Trent Neeson. Neeson, did I say
Nice
that
and
right?
nice and it's nice
Nice.
and Peyton.
Neeson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. How
Yeah.
you doing tonight?
I am doing great. Thank you guys for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's really cool. I really like talking to new owners, especially people that have been listening to the show for a while. I think it's really cool to see uh, what just what you run into, because each practice is so different, each situation is so different. I just think it's really insightful for us and the listeners to hear, what people experience in their practice ownership journey. So if you want to just go ahead and help us set the scene. Um, what kind of got you to where you are today? I know you just bought a practice, but kind of bring us back to dental school and your journey, um, just from there.
Absolutely. So I went to dental school at the University of Minnesota. I'm from Minnesota originally. And yeah, throughout dental school, I remember the first time someone told me about, you got to listen to shared practices. I literally remember that. And yeah, I really started diving into a lot of that stuff. I knew early in dental school that I did want to buy and, I did want to be an owner. I didn't really have, maybe the roadmap planned out for me, but it was always kind of an itch there. Early in dental school, I kind of toyed with the idea of potentially pursuing orthodontics. And then I just realized that there was a lot of other things that I loved about general dentistry and surgery and things like that. So then kind of my later half of dental school, just a lot of listening, a lot of learning. But then it ultimately I actually found a lot of love for the profs department. And that was actually where I spent a lot of time learning about more advanced stuff like that. And I came to the realization that a best fit for me would be doing an AEGD. I knew that, implant dentistry was going to be a big component of what I eventually wanted to do. So that was a big thing I looked for in my AEGD. Along with just the other stuff, want to get more experience with wisdom teeth, molar endo, just, some complex cases, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so I really love that. I did my residency down at AT Still in Mesa, Arizona. And then following that, worked in private practice for 1 year. And yeah, I kind of had ups and downs of being an associate. There was some pros, but also some cons. And ultimately, I just realized that my next step was to really, do my own thing, and really started to dive in and, look through practices, look through opportunities, and ultimately decided to come back home to Minnesota. So after spending 2 years in Arizona, looked at a lot of practices, found the one that I ended up buying, and yeah, the rest is history. We're about a month into it now, so it's been a very exciting time. There's a lot I'm excited to share about, being kind of right in the thick of this. So yeah, it's been
Yeah,
exciting.
absolutely. Yeah, that's been awesome. Yeah, it was definitely. I feel like that was like 5 years and like a couple minutes there. We could definitely like go
Absolutely.
back, go back and dissect into that a little bit more. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. When did you get started into podcasts? I know you said dental school, but do you remember what year it was?
That was probably maybe in like my second or third, probably, because I know Richard started in 2016. So it was probably, I don't think it wasn't too long after he started, and I had my spurts with a lot of Mark Costas, a lot of Gary Takis, a lot of yeah, and then a lot of shared
All the big
practices.
ones.
So absolutely, definitely
Yeah.
a junkie. I kind of got that label in dental school and residency of, oh, what are you listening to now?
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. No, I would
Right.
even venture
Oh,
to say it's a good thing, right?
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you kind of got into podcasts second, third year of school. Did that change how you approached school, or the time that you were in school, or how did that kind of change your viewpoint on how you went to school every day?
No, absolutely. I mean, I know I do hear some guys on here that said like they weren't super, worried about grades and things like that. I'll be honest, I kind of was one of those who did. This is like I knew I wanted to do something after school, so I definitely did put a lot of time into the school stuff too. And I tried to supplement as best I can, it was, whether it was at the gym or driving or, weekend stuff like that. And it's funny is like, I think a lot of people and, you guys, so Peyton, you are in dental school, correct? You're D2,
D3.
right?
Yeah.
D3, you're D3.
Yeah.
And then, in Clay, you're.
Yeah, I'm out of school, thankfully.
You just graduated. No, you graduated. You're an associate, right?
Yeah. So I graduated in 2019. So been out for a year and a half now.
So yeah, so it's funny. It's like when everyone thinks like school is just an overload, and you think the last thing you'd want to do after hours would be to listen about more. But I found it's actually the opposite effect. That actually really would put things more in perspective. Talking big picture stuff when you're super stressed out about like, endo practical or whatever test it might be. That like more so kind of lit the fire for me, like saying like, there is an end game after this. There is something that I'm working towards. And one day I'm going to own my own practice and I'm going to be able to call the shots and, treat people and do the procedures and the things that I want. So yeah, it was definitely a great supplement for me during dental school that kind of kept my North Star as my compass of where things were ultimately going.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Trent, I'm glad you brought that up because I always say that you gotta really kind of in dental school, like it's not fun. We just had somebody shadow in our office just the other day, and they had an interview and we're waiting to get accepted. And it's like it's not fun, but it's like you just got to get through it. And then if you can see the forest through the trees, I know I always say that, but like it's so true. And the healthy perspective that I think podcast gave me when I was going through dental school, like you said, it really had the end in mind. What am I going to be doing after this? And I guess I have a question for you, Trent. Did listening to shared practices and business, did that kind of change? Because I know you kind of talked about you went through, want to do ortho. I know I want to get more advanced procedures. What did that listening to kind of podcasts and did that kind of change your vision at all as far as your timeline for practice ownership, or like what kind of practice you were looking for too?
Absolutely. I think it definitely, before someone maybe gets exposed to any of this stuff, they think, okay, I'm going to go work for 4 or 5 years and then try to figure something out and then buy something. Whereas like, you hear enough guys with a vision and a plan, and it really sped up my time frame. And what's funny is, I guess if I would have painted my picture of how I would have wanted to do it, and I think even looking back, I said I knew I wanted to do the AEGD, and I said it. And even in I had in my mind that probably even 1 year of an associateship after that. And honestly, it like lined up exactly like that. There's a lot of other circumstances that came into play, and also with that, I mean, I don't know if I could say I'm in a better place than I'm more prepared than I could be right now. I know, there's guys that jump in right out of school, and there's guys that even jump in, say even, maybe a year out or whatever it might be. But for me, where I'm at as far as my knowledge, maybe my clinical skill set, everything. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would have done it any sooner or later. I think I was right where I needed to be at the time of purchasing. So, but definitely shared practices and all that I'd say, scoot up the time frame and definitely shape my vision of what I really thought for my future. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I'm actually kind of curious to hear a little bit more about you said AEGD, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that, like your experience, what you got more, reps with, and would you go back and do it again? It sounds like you would, but I'd just love to hear, because I feel like with a lot of people on the show, there's a lot of like impatience and like they just want to jump right into it. So I think it's also cool to see the flip side of the coin, hear, from someone who's been through it, and it sounds like I had a good experience. So if you could elaborate on that, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. No, I would 100% do the program I did again. I say one thing I didn't realize until after the fact is, you guys both went to a school and you kind of get used to the systems at that school, the way that your instructors you work with. And it was such a big paradigm shift to kind of get taken out of that and get completely put in with a whole new set of general dentists, specialists, and working with multiple specialists. And it really just, you get exposed to more systems, more philosophies, more, I mean, and obviously just, the biggest thing for me was reps. I probably had the opportunity to place, Oh, I would say probably 20 implants in my program. I was very fortunate. I was probably at the higher end of my program. I had a lot of good opportunities. I had great exposure with, scanning, milling our own surgical guides. Like I got really, I got a lot of, there was a great prosthodontist I worked with at my residency program who had a great knowledge of Blue Sky Bio. So we did a ton of that. There was an awesome endodontist in the Phoenix Valley who came in every Friday. And, I had the opportunity to probably do, somewhere between 10 and 15, tough endos with him right there, teaching, showing, discussing, all that stuff. I mean, I can't say enough about the experience that I had in my program. I had a very diverse group of very talented instructors who really cared about the group, got a great dynamic of a kind of a whole different camaraderie too, at least in my program. You're in dental school, you get used to your big group, but then what this was, you get really tight knit with another close group. But absolutely, I'd recommend, I would be a strong advocate for anyone who wants to be maybe more of an advanced general dentist. I think people can jump right in and probably do a lot of the bread and butter. And maybe even if your dental school training gives you a little more, but at least my perspective, it helped me kind of take steps forward towards the dentist that I wanted to be. And that was, kind of a high level guy. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you got a lot of value out of that. And I think from listening to you, it sounds like you got value out of that because you had a plan afterwards, again, with that end in mind, knowing that, okay, I want this out of this residency. So I'm going to find residencies that do these things like implants. We can kind of get more into that with your practice later. But it sounds like having a plan and being intentional is kind of the most important thing, I think.
Oh, it totally is. And it's kind of, it's same with dental school. You kind of get out of it what you put into it. There's days where, oh, my patient didn't show, or, and you could easily kind of take that afternoon off. Or it was the same thing here. I was always just trying to, maximize. If I had patients that needed stuff, I was just trying to, whatever I had to do to, to help them. If it was asking an instructor, say, hey, could you by chance come in an extra day to help me, do this case? Or after hours, hey, you got time to review this case with me? So it's a lot of like, I will say it's another thing you kind of get out of it, which you put into it. And like you said, picking the right one, but also when you're there, focus every day on learning and growing. There's days where I was, like tackling a thirds case that I knew was kind of over my head, and, you get frustrated, you're sitting there and you're grinding, and it's just to have somebody at least there to help you, to bail you out, to show you a thing or two. Like I know Matt talks a lot about that and kind of similar experience that he had, but I can't speak enough about that too. Is just, like a real calcified molar, and you're going after it. Whereas like, things I probably wouldn't have done out on my own, and probably might even still not do out on my own. But when you have that safety net of someone who's there to not only help you, but to show you stuff was just paramount in my growth. And it taught me how to do a lot of things, but it also told me like, maybe don't dive into that on your own.
Yeah, I think what knowing what not to do and diving into some stuff is almost more important than knowing what you can do. And I think, like you said, I know Matt's talked about this too, but like getting the reps, and it's just the confidence, right? Like you have tackled a calcified molar, and now it's like, okay, I can handle the other stuff. And it's just really the confidence. I think that kind of comes through when you're talking to patients, when you're talking to team members. Like again, it's, if you're intentional about it, you can really grow as a person and be a better clinician afterwards. Kind of in residency, were you looking for practices? Like, how did you know you wanted to go back home, or were you thinking about staying in Arizona? Kind of walk us through what you were thinking about kind of after dental school, during residency, as far as looking for a practice.
Absolutely. So after kind of towards the end of residency, my wife and I really enjoyed our time in the Phoenix Valley. And at the outset, my intent was to just go back to Minnesota after. And then after we spent a year there, we really grew to love it. We loved the warm weather and a lot of the activities. We spent a lot of weekends. We'd be hiking, out checking out new trails. We'd be doing all sorts of stuff that we weren't used to, and loved the sunshine and being able to spend time in the pool and all that. So Initially, yeah, we started looking at, what opportunities presented themselves in Arizona. And I met a guy who was going to basically say, hey, I'll bring you on, I'll mentor you, and kind of bring you on as my underling and then sell the practice to you. And I want to bring your wife on too. And so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this, but it basically didn't pan out the way that we'd wanted. It kind of fell apart actually pretty quickly. I ended up working for him it ended up basically being a year, but it was really tough. Just wasn't a great relationship between the two of us. And I did learn a lot clinically. I did grow a lot. Definitely did some great stuff, but also just made some mistakes, but learned from it, grown from it, brushed myself off. And then basically once COVID hit, we kind of had a final breaking point. And I basically said, I'm out of here. This is my notice. I'm going in a different direction. And that's when I started my ultimately my search of going back to Minnesota. My wife and I decided that we were going to do that. And we kind of began with kind of a diverse search of Minnesota. And it's kind of funny, the one that ultimately came up and presented itself is actually about 30 minutes from where my folks live and where I grew up. I didn't know the dentist personally or know the area really, just because like when I was younger, I didn't know that I was going to pursue dentistry kind of until I was in undergrad. So I didn't know a lot of the local dentists, but we started talks, looked at the books. Like I said, I probably looked at like 7 or 8 in that time period, but this is definitely the best fit for location and a lot of other factors that I'll discuss. But ultimately that it ended up linking up and working out, even despite my kind of self-imposed time crunch that we gave ourselves. But it was a challenging year, but I'm very happy to be back home and in the practice that I'm in.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. What was, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what was your process like, I guess, looking for a practice back in your hometown? Like, how'd you go about doing that? Was it mailers? Was it brokers? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I didn't have the huge luxury of time with the mailers. And so I basically reached out to anything that I basically kind of just devoured the broker sites. And I looked through a few, and probably got prospectuses on, like I said, probably 7 or 8. And I just kind of was going through that and seeing what was really a good fit. And, sometimes, especially in like metro areas, if something's sitting there for a while, it's gone stale. There's some reason why, people maybe aren't wanting it. I guess a luxury for me was part of the vision I set for myself is I actually knew that I kind of didn't want to be in a super big area. So I guess in Minnesota, like the big metro areas, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and that's probably the most, the busiest area and the biggest metro area. And, outside of that, there are some other towns of, say, somewhere between 50 and 100,000, but I knew I kind of wanted to even smaller than that. And I was kind of actually looking, a big thing for me was actually, I was kind of looking to be in that, maybe that 20 to 25,000 kind of a sweet spot. I mean, I'm from a town of 1,100. So like 1 stoplight and 2 bars is like where I'm from. So,
wow.
Love that.
So
Describing
you're familiar.
stoplights.
Yeah. Stoplights. You're familiar with that though, right? I mean, you understand what that life is like versus, in the bigger cities. So.
Absolutely. And kind of part of my vision was I'm like, well, I kind of what I ultimately want to be is kind of that big fish in a smaller pond. I want to be the kind of the premier guy in my area for advanced dentistry, for implants, for cosmetics, all that sort of stuff. That's kind of the vision that I set for myself. And, that's something else you got to think about when you do buy a practice is, if you're going to be in a bigger area, you just are going to deal with, more competition, more specialists. I'm not saying it can't be done, but you just got to know that, you have a whole different ball game of, like I said, being in a busy metro area where, everyone's got a top-notch, beautiful practice. Everyone's got, great branding, a lot of, like I said, a lot of specialists and things like that. And whereas where I knew I was like, this would present a great opportunity for me to really, like I said, kind of be the big fish in a smaller pond.
Yeah. And Trent, did you know in dental school and kind of through residency that you wanted to be that kind of practice? What kind of idea or vision? I know you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but what kind of vision did you have for your ideal practice that you would buy? Was it that productive solo that like does a lot of stuff, keeps a lot of stuff in house. What was your vision like for your practice? And then I got a follow-up question after you answer.
Absolutely. To speak the shared practices lingo, my vision was definitely, vision is and was productive solo. I guess maybe character traits that lean more towards that for me was, I think a lot of times people talk about like, well, I want it to necessarily depend so much on me. And whereas like the productive solo is more like, I want this to be me, my baby. I want it to be, maybe me doing the one with the advanced training, doing the advanced procedures. That's kind of at least what that was my vision. Yeah, that's been pretty early on. I mean, I knew kind of coming out, I didn't want to say like get into any form of partnership, and at least in the short term, not really a vision say of group. At least it's not saying something in the years that may modify, but at least on the outside was a vision of me being a productive solo.
And I know we have a lot of listeners that, and really students and dentists that have graduated, they're pre-owners that don't even know where to begin on how to figure out what their vision is. So like what kind of experiences that you had helped you kind of form your vision?
Yeah. So I would say you always hear about this stuff. Like, and it's funny actually today in our practice I had a big meeting with everyone, and we laid out today that it's taken me a couple months to put this all together, but our vision, our mission, and our core values for the practice. And the team was pretty stoked and excited to hear all that. But even for my personal life, you got to think about, and then these are things that I always hear George talk about. It's kind of like maybe what you want your stressors to be, or necessarily like, what do you think your strong suits are? Mine was like, well, I want to be able to, like I said, be responsible for everything that's there. That's the other thing. Like say you go to more the group model, it's obviously has its benefits, but maybe a trade-off is you are maybe dealing with associates, and you're dealing with maybe potentially turnover of associates. Being an associate myself, that's exactly something that, when you own the practice, and it's tough to find good associates because it seems like, the majority of guys that are rock star associates, they want to be owners. So like that's a big factor for it. Maybe not wanting like say turnover in the practice. It's being responsible for all the work that's done, say things don't go right and then, associate leaves, and you're kind of there to maybe pick up the pieces and fix what was there. Just being like, maybe just in control of, like you said, just how the work is all done and everything like that. And just kind of being the guy behind your brand. That's probably one of the biggest things that I wanted. I wanted just like me personally to be, strongly affiliated with the community and strongly affiliated with the practice.
Yeah, I think that's so valuable I think that's the kind of the first step. You have to know what you want and know yourself, because it's so valuable to know that, because now you say you have a failed associateship like you did, you're looking at all these practices. Well, some of these practices might not be what you're wanting, and you're going to be wasting a lot of time and potentially money trying to dive into all this stuff. And is this right for me? Where if you have that from the onset, like you can already weed some of these practices out, and you have more high value practices that are more right for you.
No, absolutely. Because it does kind of help shape you. It's trying to, if you have your vision, it's then you're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's more of, okay, this is what I want, and this is really kind of taking me off path, even though it looks good, or it's sexy on paper or whatever it might be. But if it's not the right fit for you, and those things are very different, it has to do with everything. So the practice I was looking at, I knew as a productive solo, I wanted at least 4, but preferably 5 ops. And thankfully that's what the practice had. Another factor for me was implant dentistry. And a lot of them, I knew it was either going to be, okay, it's either something I'm going to have to completely implement, or thankfully I was actually inheriting a practice where he was placing and restoring, so that some of the systems are there, some of the equipment is there, some of the patient base is there, some of the patient base is used to that. So like that was another actually big bonus for me, because I knew I was either going to have to, like I said, either completely start it all from scratch, or maybe potentially inheriting something that's there. So that was a big factor for me. And then obviously, you see a lot of practices on there that are doing 3, 4, 5, 600,000, and that's just, Can that be done too? Absolutely. But, getting something that's, maybe got a little bit higher production, a little bit better hygiene production, things that when you come in have some of the scaffolding in place to help support you early in ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like we've strung along the audience long enough. Do you want to go into a little bit of just the opportunity that you found? Obviously you said ops, but how much it's doing, kind of what their procedure mix looks like, that kind of thing.
Peyton, before he answers this, I want to know how it was talking with all the brokers.
Oh, actually,
yeah, what your experience was like with that, because we'll get to the practice. We have tons of questions about that. You're only 4 weeks in, which is super, super exciting. But I want to hear about like your experience with, were you guys living in Arizona and trying to find these practices in Minnesota? Like, how did that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I reached out to, I think every market's got a few, and it's funny that I've been looking for a while, and there was one broker who like they had this full questionnaire, like you had to answer all these questions, like what are you looking for, this, that, and I never would fill it out because like I don't know, it just seemed like a lot of work. Whereas the other one's just like, okay, sign the non-disclosure, and then they'll send you the practice financials. And finally got to the point where I was like, okay, well, I'm making this a full concerted effort here. And so I did. I finally filled that one out. And after it was basically listed as my area. And then when I finally get it, sure enough, it's like the one broker I had been, maybe neglecting to go through for months, because he had he basically had put up a wall, but looking at it now, he basically was trying to keep out the tire kickers, and it worked. And because I was very serious about it, but the broker I ended up working with, I thought he was a good guy. He was a great guy. There's a lot of communication that goes through a whole transition and transaction. He is a lawyer as well, so but yeah, dealing with them a lot of times they're just like it's they email it and they're like, oh, what do you think, and what do you want to do now, and what's your next steps? Whereas this broker was pretty awesome. Pretty early, we got to set up a visit, and he really did a great job of kind of tailoring that whole process through there. But yeah, to answer your question, I was kind of navigating from afar from Arizona to communicate with these guys, and it was a couple of plane trips up, and yeah, I don't think it's the easiest thing, or nor do I recommend trying to buy cross country. There are easier ways and methods, but my case, I guess the eggs were broke, and I had to make an omelet out of it. So
you did it. You did it. That's all there is to it, right?
Absolutely.
Now I'm hungry. Okay. No, Trent, you can tell us a little bit more about your practice. The demographics, how many ops, what's the history of it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the guy that I bought it from, he was, looking to retire, 64, and 5 operatories, procedure mix. It's actually kind of a unique thing. So he really, in the last few years, kind of added more of the implant dentistry, a lot of like full fixed arch cases. He did, a fair amount of that, a lot of singles, bridges, stuff like that. But the other dynamic that was interesting was he had employed dental therapists in the past. I don't know how familiar you guys in our listenership is familiar with that, but it's basically a mid-level practitioner, and he had employed them for a few years. Like he'd have one for a year, and then he had another one, and basically we'd just employ them to basically do the restorative. And the most recent one had departed. It was like in March, and so it just kind of put a unique dynamic into it. So it's like some of the numbers included maybe some production from, like the dental therapist, but then they also had like, a salary that would be like, higher than a hygienist. So it kind of put that interesting dynamic into place. I knew that when I took over, it really wasn't part of my vision to just say and employ a future dental therapist. But as far as production wise, with the combination of that, with him doing a lot of like I said, mostly he just did a lot of, I don't know, when I was in there for the few weeks before closing, it would seem like every day he's probably placing maybe one or two. So he did quite a few, and he really tailored towards that. But in the years past, they had been doing between, I would say they did 1.15 last year, and it kind of tailored between that and like 1.3 probably over the past like 5 years or so. And yeah,
definitely a good size practice. I feel like that's right around kind of like the sweet spot for a 5-op solo doc, like 1.3, 1.2 in that range.
I am so proud that we still have Q Optics as a sponsor for the Shared Practices podcast. It's been almost 2 years and I'm still using my 4.5x Prism loops. They're custom through the lens. They're beautiful. People like them. I get compliments on them. But more than anything, I love the magnification. Some people are hesitant to jump up from 2.5 to 3.5, maybe to 4 or even 4.5. I have never met someone who said, you know what, I really wish I could see less when I'm doing dentistry. I really just if there's decay still there, I don't want to know. I just want to close this tooth up. You should want to see as much as possible. It's going to make your preps better. It's going to make your life better. You're going to see more. You're going to catch more. The only person I can give a pass to, we had someone buy some loops and share them on our Facebook page. And I was like, oh no, why didn't you get the Prisms? Why didn't you get the 3.5, 4.5? He's like, well, I'm a pediatric dentist. I was like, fine. Okay, you get a pass. You can buy normal Q Optics loops. Everyone else, you should be buying 3.5 plus. You're not going to regret it. So if you're finally ready to upgrade, email sales@qoptics.com and use the promo code SP19, as in Shared Practices SP19, for a discount off your loops and light combo.
Was there anything that he wasn't doing in his office? Anything that new that you were bringing to the table, or was he pretty much doing all of it?
Didn't really do a ton of endo, and honestly, I haven't been doing any since I started because I got to get some updated equipment. So he was doing that, and I know I'll be able to bring with my knowledge, and I'm actually going to do kind of some more advanced training with implants, and I know I can at least match what he was doing and continue to grow on that. Really wasn't doing, I guess, a ton of crowns. I remember looking at the procedure report from last year, and it didn't seem like a ton. It might have been like 100 last year, which I mean, in all things, I really don't think is too many. But I'd referred out like a lot of pedo, and I'll be honest, I'm not a big pedo guy either. There's been quite a few that have been there, and I know some of them play nice and you get the work done, and other ones you're kind of pulling your hair out after a half hour. But I love kids, but they just sometimes, God bless the pedodontists. I just don't know if I got it. I always have to me.
It's a very impressive skill, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm impressed with this doc that he was adding those, implants, full fixed arch procedures like so late in his career. I feel like a lot of dentists are just kind of cruise control at that point, but he, I guess, was really putting his foot on the gas. That's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. He kind of started, it's kind of like a tale of two chapters for him. He was telling me a lot about how 2005, 2006 is when he really just started getting training in it and doing it and kind of adding some of these on late, and had some time during we didn't really have a transition period, and I'll probably talk about that a little bit, but I at least had some opportunity to at least see okay, what are you doing? What labs are you using? What materials you're using? Kind of workflow and stuff like that. So thankfully he was very helpful in the pre-closing transition period.
Yeah, that's great.
So Trent, how long from the time that you reached out and got all the information to closing, how long was that period of when you got the keys?
Yeah, it's the big thing I will say with this is stuff takes time, even if you got your foot on the gas and you want everything done, the things that I want us to share is I don't know, you think closing, okay, but you just sign the paperwork and it's done. But I first reached out to him. It was in early June when I, got the prospectus. We had a few phone conversations after that. Had my CPA look at the prospectus. He's like, yeah, that's probably a good, something at least worth pursuing. We flew up and met in July, July 14th. We met, and on his intention was to have them all meet the team, which I think was, and the broker thought it was very, maybe a little jump in the gun as well. But first meeting and meeting, the entire team, at least saying this is a prospective buyer. The team was aware he'd been looking to sell for about a year and a half. So we met that point, and pretty much right after that, July 14th, we kind of just started to set the wheels in motion. You start getting your team together, and I've heard that a lot on previous podcasts, but it does take a team and an army to get this all done. And then we ended up closing on October 2nd. So I mean, and this was not I was kicking back. It's just the stuff, it definitely takes time. So July 14th, October 2nd is what it kind of took to get through everything. And the only other factor was we did buy the real estate as well. So there was a lot of factors in that added to it.
Okay. I was going to say, what in that process took a lot of time? Like, was there one piece that really like held you up, or was it just a little bit of everything along the way that just ended up making it a 4 to 5 month process?
Yeah, it's just, it was number one, it's then you start the process with speaking with a lender and, you go through all that stuff. And, the big thing I will preach too is everything I've heard is, keeping yourself liquid. And it's so the truth. I mean, I thought I was overboard with it and I kind of barely skated by, to be honest, based on what the lender wanted. So I knew kind of in my associate year, I wasn't hammering down debt. I knew that I was getting ready for this. So I knew that. And I knew as soon as things fell through there, I'm like, my wife were both and I were on board and saying, look, we know we can spend this, we can hammer down debt, but the biggest thing is I know I'm going to need this capital if we're going to, buy something. So that's a big thing I can't stress enough because, they kind of have their hard pressed limits and COVID actually even kind of bumped those up. So, I mean, just for my lender, normally they'd say there was deals in the past where they would say that, oh yeah, we can do the deal with 2 or 3% of the purchase price, meaning you have that liquid. And they were almost up to 8%. So, you know what I mean? You do the math on that, you're buying $1 million practice, you do have to have the capital ready, and they don't budge. They got to say, they say like, look, this is your, like, you got to pay to play. This is the line you got to show on your books. So like it was all the processes and interviews with that. And then you kind of get your attorney and it's setting up an LLC, setting up a PLLC, all that stuff gets filed. That all takes time. And then it's, then it's getting the documents all drafted. And then it's kind of sometimes a little bit of back and forth with those documents, your lawyer to the broker, and that kind of gets kicked back and forth. And then it's with the real estate took a ton of, inspections and this and that. And then like they missed one. So then it kind of got pushed back. So yeah, it seemed like it was like a never ending checklist that every week was like, okay, sign this. Okay, call this person. Okay, reach out to that person. So it is, your advisory team really does kind of lead you through that. And this is kind of what I wanted to share with the listenership is like kind of the nuts and bolts. You kind of always hear like the way beginning, you kind of hear the end, but like going through it, it's, there's just a lot of these details that go into place. And the keys are your advisory team really does help you. And like I said, that's just CPA. That is, an attorney who knows dental deals, and that's exactly what I worked with. The guy that does a lot of them. The lender. A lot of times you're in contact with the lender of what things you'll need, and then a lot of insurances. Yeah, and there's another thing. There's so many insurances you have to have in place for all this. You got to have, your malpractice if you had to transfer that, and then like buying the building and business and commercial and workers' comp, and so. I'm not trying to overwhelm the listenership, but there's just a lot of dominoes that got to fall from saying, hey, I want to buy this to absolutely the day you get the keys.
Yeah. And I feel like it's like, would you rather be blindsided by it when you're transitioning, or would you rather have some sort of heads up? I feel like most of the people listening here would at least like to have some sort of idea with what they're getting into. I also really like the point that you brought up about not aggressively paying down your loans just because you knew the practice ownership was on the horizon. I feel like so many people just kind of let their emotions take over with debt, which is understandable. I mean, it's a big number looking at you in the face, but you just have to know that it's best for the long term to keep that liquidity up, so you're ready when the time comes to be able to buy a practice. Because I mean, like you were saying, COVID definitely didn't do anyone any favors with getting a loan for a practice, and I would definitely say that it made it worse. I've even heard some as far as like actually having to do a down payment, which I feel like is pretty uncommon. So I'm really glad that you brought those things up and that you're able to make that work out for you. So yeah, you kind of talked about the process a little bit. So you said you've been in the practice for about a month now. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we started, the first day I saw patients was Monday the 5th. So we're in our kind of closing up week 5 tomorrow.
Wow.
Awesome. Yeah.
So,
Well, congrats. First off, that's awesome.
Thank you.
What's it been like? Just give us a rundown of kind of overview, and then we can always dig deeper if we need to.
Absolutely. I would say I did have to deal with kind of a major let's say, challenge to overcome. Day one, I get a text from a staff member at 8 o'clock the night before they were opening, and basically said I took a job elsewhere and I won't be returning. And that was the only assistant I was going to have scheduled for day one.
Ooh.
So,
Oh my God.
yeah. So like I say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I did have one other assistant who was basically looking to retire, and she was willing to help with the transition. Unfortunately, she had to kind of step into the role. So for the first 3 weeks, I did only have, one assistant, which definitely put a damper on, just what we're able to do and produce. So that was definitely a challenge right off the get go. Yeah, it's a lot that you're coming into. You're coming into a whole new team. In my case, a whole new practice management software that I'm not super fond of, but I'm just kind of dealing with it for the time being. That's probably, I think that's the last wrench I need to throw in it right now. But you're getting used to a lot of stuff, and it's like you do want to make changes, but it's like you also don't want to push the envelope with it too. It's like it's a delicate dance that you're doing. So right off the bat, what I did is I got some, relatively inexpensive intraoral cameras, and, and I was used to using that. And I think that's been a huge implementer right off the bat, just because, when you're going into a new situation and the patient's used to seeing, the seasoned dentist for so long, and they're like, oh, now I'm seeing this new young pup who's probably got bills to pay. But, it's just, I think the camera situation really just helps kind of take the pressure off you and just saying, hey, I'm just pointing out what I see here and what I'd recommend if you were my brother or my sister. And the staff has really embraced that. The patient base has really embraced that. But yeah, other than that, and then we had to, obviously we ended up actually making this decision to, because I haven't mentioned this, my wife has actually been doing this with me, and she's been taking a big role in the practice, and we kind of had to actually let another staff member go so that she would have more of a role at the front desk. So, and then pretty soon we had to make a hire. So right off the bat, right in the month, I've had an employee quit with zero notice. I've had to let an employee go, and I've had to hire someone. So it's been kind of just a little bit of baptism by fire here in month one.
Yeah. Trent, was there any transition for the owner, or was it like, hey, here's the keys on Friday, you're starting on Monday, and I'm riding off into the sunset? Or was there like a couple weeks or anything like that? What was that like?
So I'm actually really excited to share about this. So initially what I wanted to do was let's do a little transition, like maybe even the rest of the year is kind of what I was initially thinking was, okay, you have your ways of doing these cases, you have this ways of doing everything. I would like to just maybe slowly start to take over these roles. Who do you call when something breaks? And he's like, oh, this is the guy you call for that. And like, it's just, there's so many things like, okay, who does the snow removal? We got a freak snowstorm in Minnesota, and it's who do you do for a lot of that stuff. And so that was initially what we were going to do. And we had talked about that. And then about 3 weeks before close, he's like, I've been doing a lot of discussion with my broker and myself. And he's like, and I actually think it'll just be best for everyone to just do a hard part, do it just a clean transition. And at first I was like, oh shoot, I got a lot to figure out here in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, I'll admit the first 2 weeks were tough. But honestly, I'm actually so glad that we did it that way. And it's funny how you think one way, and you think, I want this cushion, I want this safety net, I want this to be just like a slower and smoother transition. And it was completely opposite, but I know it would be very challenging had we not done it that way. Like I said, it just changes and you start to implement things that you want to do. And I know for a fact it would have been, well, I say something, they're maybe not happy with it. They go to the old doc who's maybe not in that technical role anymore. But to all of them, I would still be Robin to Batman, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's a tough dynamic to have, and I think I think why a lot of people are in that same situation where like, I just want a longer transition. I think a lot of that's just out of fear, maybe fear of the unknown. But I mean, you've had a lot going on in the last month, but you've grown as a person and you're probably better for it. And it's probably an easier path than what it could have been. So it sounds like it was actually a blessing in disguise here. So.
No, it really was. Like I said, that was what I was totally wanting, but I know right now I know it would be just like a power struggle, kind of a dynamic thing that would just be challenging. And I remember Howard Franz said this once. It's like, you can stand on the edge of the pool reading a book on how to swim for 5 years, but until you just get pushed into the deep end, that's when you're gonna, start dog paddling. And hopefully we're getting past the dog paddle and maybe into a little bit of a breaststroke. But I would be an advocate for, it's like I said, it is scary, but it's just kind of one of those things that I think was for the best for everyone, for the staff, for the patients. I'm a firm believer in my situation. It worked out really well the way that it did.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, would you rather rip off the Band-Aid slowly, or would you rather just rip it off? Like, and I feel like no one's like, oh yeah, slowly would be great. Like, no one says that.
Or it's like, you're never going to be like 100% ready. It's like, you just gotta like, comes a point where you're ready enough, and you've surrounded yourself with the right team. You've listened to shared practices all this time. Like, enough, and you know what you're doing, and you're going to grow, and it's going to be stressful probably, but you're going to get through it.
Yeah. And going off of what Clay said, like, if you're an avid listener of this show, you're probably ahead as far as like in business knowledge, ahead of most dentists, like regardless of age. I mean, they might have experience with it, and they'll have like more clinical experience, but um, the business part of it, the ownership part of it shouldn't. I mean, it feels scary, but it shouldn't. Listening to the show and being active, online with all the different forums and whatnot, it really helps prepare you for what is to come. And I feel like you're a good example of that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, like I said, it hasn't been easy, but I know that it seems like every day we're getting things better, and it's you just every day it does present its challenges. And just for instance, for me personally, where a year of say associateship and residency came into play is, at the beginning, you're just super focused on the dentistry and just even getting through the dentistry. Like, I remember days in residency, I'd come home and just like a sweaty mess and like, just being super stressed out about that. And now, like, yeah, I still have this. Like, I mean, I had a tooth that was just a nightmare today, and it was just, just bleeding like crazy. And then you got the hygienist, one is dinging, and then the second one is dinging, and you're just, you just have so many things. And you have a front desk come and ask a question, and just there's so many things that go into it. Whereas, like, I'm not saying I'm this clinical beast by any means, but if I'd have done this, and like I said, I don't want this to scare anyone away from pursuing it right out of dental school. What I'm just sharing is my personal experiences of where I benefited greatly from associateship. And, I would say at least my recommendation for people to just do a little bit of associateship, because you know what, you're going to make mistakes and stuff is going to screw up, and you're going to have patients ticked off. And sometimes, it might be better if that doesn't happen on when the sign has your name on it as your building, just to share some of my experiences.
Oh yeah. I think like being a new dentist has its own challenges, right? Like just getting through the dentistry, and then adding being a new owner all at the same time. I think, yeah, there's a lot that can go on during, if both of those are happening, congruently. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm glad I've done an associateship and looking to buy a practice soon. But yeah, it's amazing how comfortable you are like a year out of school. And like, I'm pretty comfortable with like clinical stuff. Like you said, Trent, there's stuff that still sometimes you just get in there and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a mess. But most of the time it's like, okay, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I can handle this. So, Trent, can you talk a little bit more about like how many staff you have, front office, and that kind of breakdown of your office?
Absolutely. We have 2 hygienists. They've been awesome. They've been very receptive. One's been there for about 5 years. One's been there for a year. And yeah, like I said, they've been great for the transition. They've been very receptive. They've been very open to change, and they've been just very excited about maybe the energy and the things I'm bringing to the practice. And then initially there was basically someone her title was basically clinic director. She kind of had a lot of duties maybe similar to an office manager, but that was just kind of the role that she was appointed at, kind of the head front desk. She'd been there for 20 years. And then we had another, just basically, receptionist who had been there, about 6 months. That was the one that we decided that we made the decision not to employ. We kind of had a point where it was like, well, we ultimately know if we bring her on, we're going to have to let her go to basically give my wife a role. But we ultimately just made the decision, actually, my lawyer's advice to not actually just bring her on and maybe just not even enter an employer-employee agreement. It's kind of what we made that decision. It's nothing personal to her. It's just we just really didn't have enough seats on the bus is kind of where we were at. And then when I came in there was 2 assistants. One is basically looking to retire. And then, like I said, basically the one kind of gave me the 11 hours notice saying, hey, I'm not coming in anymore or tomorrow. And that was kind of a smack in the face a little bit. But we kind of adapted and then ended up basically going right into hire mode right on day one, making some postings and actually brought an employee on that had previously worked at the practice. And there's maybe a dynamic between her and the doctor that didn't quite mesh very well, but the team all spoke very highly of her and we had a great interview with her. We brought her back on. And so she's been with us 2 weeks now. And then, we're kind of in the process now of looking to add kind of that other second assistant as our, my other one she's just looking to retire. So that's where we're at. Two in the front desk, 2 hygiene, 2 assistants, and kind of depending on where I take it and grow it, maybe potentially adding kind of someone in like that sterile tech, unlicensed dental assistant role to help hygiene with instruments, help my other assistants flip rooms. If we want to get to maybe like a busier schedule, that's something I'm possibly evaluating for the future.
How has that been with the 5 ops? Have you felt like cramped yet, or has it been a good amount of space so far?
It's been fine to this point. Honestly, our schedule we've had some challenges, getting things full. Same thing with the hygiene schedule. And I guess I'm nowhere near maximized right now in terms of my busyness. And honestly, a big thing for me this weekend is writing down my procedure time so that we can kind of shorten things. So right now we're really not running into that yet. We kind of have other issues of efficiency of clinic, like scheduling efficiently, that sort of stuff. So, just stuff that, you don't even think about. You think about, okay, I got to write down how long do I want for every procedure. Whereas like in the past, and Clay, you're just probably given it by the practice. They say, oh, here's what you got, make it work, versus kind of selectively doing that. So I think we're fine with the 5 for now. And like I said, the hygiene are using the 2, and at least me being a productive solo, I think it would take a while before me to say outgrow using those 3.
Absolutely.
Trent, are you using any analytics software, PBN, anything like that?
Currently not, but it's I know I hear you guys and being big advocates for it, and I know that's a great way to get snapshots of that and really kind of see what you're doing, especially now that we've completed a month. It'd be good to actually start to get some tracking on that. One thing I know is I don't think we have SoftDent, which is, like I said, I'm not a big fan of it. It's just, I think eventually I'm going to be looking to switch, but I know right now I don't think PBN is compatible with SoftDent. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We'll have to look into that. That sounds right. I know a lot of people, if they're going to switch to Open Dental.
Exactly what exactly what I'm evaluating.
Yeah. I can't having that analytics. I have it, and I just kind of look at it in my own practice, and I haven't really implemented very much, but even having that knowledge and seeing okay, here's the reappointment rate for all these hygienists, and here's how much we're treatment planning, and here's how many future appointments we have. So it's just the information that you can get from it. It really kind of focuses in on, because like you said, there's tons and tons of stuff that you need to do as the owner. And so really figuring out the 2 to 3 things that you can do right now to get to where you want to be, having that specificity and just really that clarity, it's super, super helpful. I don't understand how anyone can do it without it, really, because you just don't know, right? You're kind of just going blind. So, it sounds like you're kind of headed down that path. So, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I also wanted to touch on is I feel like you kind of brought it up a little bit about not wanting to rock the boat too much. But how have you walked that fine line of wanting to make changes in things versus leaving them how they were to kind of, build up trust of the team, of the patients, etc.? What's that looked like for you?
I think a lot of it almost culminated today. Like I said, today was a big, meeting of, I really unveiled our whole mission, our vision, and all of our core values. And I kind of, throughout this week, is actually starting to reveal them. I think big things that it was early on was earning their trust that, like, I'm doing what I think is right. And, there'd be times where even someone would show up on the schedule and, like, this has already been done. Like, you have an hour and a half blocked off for a 13 DO, and, there's nothing more frustrating. I'm like, yeah, this is already done. And, send them, there's nothing else they need to do. But just I think early on was earning the patient's trust, like saying, okay, I am in this for the right reasons. And, just really slowly and investing in them. That was a big thing, is just like after a procedure, like, explaining something, or same thing with my hygienist. I was like, how much did the doc really say invest time in discussing things of how things are, setting expectations? And they both have said, well, not really a whole lot. Like, you've done way more than that. So I think early on it was kind of creating value and maybe just showing who I am. And then it kind of just tapered into, like, this is our vision of what we want. We want to be the premier practice of this area, that we draw patients from 60 miles because we provide care that no one else can, And once you kind of start to frame it in that way, they're like, okay, this is why we're not just doing this for another thing on our checklist. It's like, this is where the boat's going, guys, and I'm passionate about this. I care about this. This is, everything I've been working for is what we've built here. And so when you start to put it that, and when you really, a lot of it is just putting things in terms of, what is best for our patients. How do we provide the best care for our patients? And showing, I think I've earned a lot of their trust by just showing how much I do care about patients, making the post-op calls at night, of surgeries, you name it. Just all these little things have started to maybe gain points with them of credibility and trust. And then, and as time goes on, they can start to see that, okay, there's a reason why he's wanting to do all this. Whereas if you just start and say, do X, Y, Z because I said so I can make more money, like, that's going to fall on deaf ears. Versus if you say, this is where we're going trying to be the premier and the best practice of this area, with the best reputation, the best customer service, all that sort of stuff. It really helps shape it for them.
You kind of spent those first couple weeks building trust with your team, and then now, like you said, you created your values, you created your, what you stand for. And you feel like that's kind of landing a little bit better because of that initial couple weeks you spent building trust with your team, with patients, etc.
Totally. It was all part of the process. And, well, just like even a team member's daughter was having tooth pain, and I worked her in, and, she was having a tough time. I mean, but to work that in, and to basically get her, I basically pulled her tooth for her to help her out, and, just show, like, she's like, okay, I really do appreciate you show that you do care about us, and just little things like that. I've been seeing so much that it's about, it does take a team. You can't do this by yourself. You need a team around you that's going to go to bat for you and be an advocate for you. And, and the biggest way I've been trying to put things in terms of, case acceptance and getting patients to do treatment is, I'm saying, look, guys, I am not trying to be salesy, and I am not trying to find treatment that's not there. Anything that I'm telling you guys, we need to do this so that they can understand what they need and help them make the decision that they need to make. That's all this is. It's not salesy. It's, you need to do this or else. It's, here's what I see. Here's what's going to happen if you don't do something about it. And if the team sees that, they're more likely, when they're up at the front desk or in the consult room, like, no, Dr. Neisen is a good guy. And if he's saying this, it's because he does truly mean it, or he does believe that this is in your best interest in your health. Versus if they don't believe in you, you don't know what's going on in that consult room. It's like, I don't know, this is just what he said you need. Do you want to do it, or do you want to schedule, or what do you think? It's a whole different dynamic when they believe in you. And that's something I've really tried to establish early on.
Trent, what do you think your biggest? I know you talked about what you're doing and conversations you're having with your team. What do you think your biggest challenge is, other than the assistant quitting before the first day?
That was definitely up there. I would say just
Yeah,
maybe getting used to moving at a quicker pace. That's something I'm slowly just trying to like twist the dial on. Um, I would say also would be some new patient flow. That one necessarily wasn't a strong suit. And really kind of all marketing got let off after COVID. So one thing I actually did is last Friday, my wife and I, we went in, and the radio is actually a strong kind of drawing in our area. And that's actually what he used a lot in the past. He kind of exclusively marketed it to implant patients. He would have them go in there, do a testimonial, talk about their experience. And so we went in and we just kind of really hashed out like what's the message we want to present to the community. We did that, and so those actually started today. So those went out. We got the ads. We got the ads going, and we're investing in that. I mean, I guess another challenge was, I had to get a cone beam. He wasn't using cone beam, so actually the old panel got taken out today. CVCT is going in tomorrow.
nice.
Like I said, you guys are catching me right in like the thick of all this. So that's why I really wanted to be on it. So
That's awesome.
We love having people on in this time period just because everything's so fresh. Like there's all these challenges and struggles and also victories that you have early in ownership that 2 or 3 years down the road they might not be as significant, but I feel like this is like what people really enjoy hearing. So yeah, it's awesome that you were able to make some time to kind of show us what you've been going through and what it's been like. So that being said, looking back, I mean, I know it's only been a month, but you can, I guess, include the transition process in this too. But if you could go back and do it again, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I don't think so. No, I think everything kind of just, like I said, I'm happy with where I am, the community that I'm in, the practice that I ended up, in. I'm very happy with, like I said, the majority of the staff that's been, anchors throughout this transition. And early on, like I said, the big thing is that transition. Like I said, I think he was a good guy, but I just think, especially if you're somebody who says, you want to kind of be the leader, and if you want to be the face of it, I think it would just be presented challenges to do that with the older doc remaining on. I'm sure there's a lot of situations where it can work well, and it can work well as a slow transition period. But I think in my situation, just knowing my personality and kind of what I wanted to do going forward, no, absolutely. Just kind of how things worked. And, I guess one thing I will add is how we kind of came to the culmination of all the mission, vision, core value stuff today. I did take time, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, was to really get their input on it and said like, okay, guys, what are important things to you? Because it's kind of like, if they don't have input in it and they're just told like, okay, here are your commandments, it's different than versus like saying, hey, I want to hear what you guys have to say. Ultimately I am the leader, but I do care about the team, and I ultimately want this, this is kind of our way I said is like, this is our code for all of us and where our practice is going. But going back to your question, no, I don't think I would have done anything different to this point.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I really like too how you had the team involved with that. Because if you have core values, if you have a mission statement and they're not involved with it, it's just going to be writing on a wall, just going to be words on a page. It's not going to mean anything to them. But getting them involved, having an input, it makes it feel like they're valued, and it's something they can stand behind. So that's definitely something that's super, super cool. But
Trent, where do you see your practice in 2021? So like a year from now or end of 2021, what are your goals?
I'm glad you asked that. So I actually just committed to going to Wade Pilling's aesthetic full mouth rehab course. So I just made that commitment. So I'm going to be going to that. That's a big part of where I want to be, as a practitioner, as a provider. I'm also thinking I'm going to do pathway. I do have a good implant background, but I kind of just want to start to finish comprehensive, and especially just get some more guidance on full arch with, extractions, alvi, that whole process. And I see, by the end of 2021, that's just being, I have obviously production goals of where I want things to be. But yeah, I can see us being, just kind of a light year from where we are now in terms of right now we're just still figuring out instruments and I'm ordering stuff and we're organizing and all that sort of stuff, all the little things that go into it. But, a year from now, I'd love us to be, a solid core team where we're all speaking each other's language. We're very systematic and efficient. Like I said, I kind of have like, maybe a target production of where I want things to be so that we're paying bills. But I also want to get to the point where, this is helping me pursue, ultimately why we go into this. Obviously it's not all about the money, but we do have, goals for our lifestyle and where we want to go. Otherwise, this is who this community is speaking to. Shared practices are people who want more and want to become more, and we have high visions for our lives. But yeah, I really have high aspirations of where I want to be at this time next year and have a lot of things ironed out, really have a solid branding established, a Google review number, start from scratch. We're at about 15. We're working with Swell now. So we got 15 in a month, which is,
I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Got to get Swell on board.
Yeah, we got them. We got that going. So yeah, those are just kind of some of the snippets of where I want to be a year from now.
That's awesome. It sounds like you're putting in the work now, and it's only been a month, right? Like this is in the very, very infant stage of this. And it sounds like you've always been putting the work in, whether it's listening to the podcast in dental school, whether it's trying to get the most out of residency. It sounds like you're gonna be successful. Success leaves clues, and you're doing all the right stuff. I'm excited for you. We need to get you back on. Some
follow
updates.
up is definitely in order. And it's just really cool. I feel like shared practice is finally getting to the age now where we can see people that have grown up in the shared practice ecosystem and kind of gone out on their own and, bought a practice. They're like doing the thing that we've been talking about for so many years. So it's really cool. And I think that our listeners will think the same. It's cool to see what the opportunity is like out there when you prepare yourself well, you have a vision for what you want to accomplish, and you go out there and you just get it done. So, honestly, thank you so much for being on today. It's been a pleasure. You've had a bunch of good information, and I'm sure all our listeners will really appreciate it. So thank you.
Absolutely. It was an honor to be here. And, I just want to be of value to the way that many previous listeners have been to me. So any way that I can be, I'm not saying I got all the answers, but I would love to, be a resource for anyone who wants to reach out. So
Trent, if anybody wants to reach out, what's the best way to contact you?
I would say either Facebook or email. Facebook, Trent.neisen, Neisen, and then, or email is trent.neisen, neisen.bdf@gmail.com.
Sweet. That'll be, I think, in the show notes. I think that's what they say.
Yeah, no, that feels right. That feels right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Trent. Again, we really appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you guys next week on the Shared Practices podcast.